My name is Katie Sherwood, and I'm an MSW candidate at HPU. The present study explores whether or not childhood trauma and adversity plays a role in how young adults grieve. Specifically, the study looks at whether or not ACE scores or adverse childhood experiences affect overall grief and the risk of developing persistent complex bereavement disorder, or PCBD, formerly known as complicated grief. Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, include things like abuse, neglect, and other household challenges, such as domestic violence, substance abuse in the household, mental illness, parental separation or divorce, and an incarcerated parent or caregiver. Most of the population has experienced at least one ACE. And the more ACEs that someone experiences, the more mental and physical health risks. As you can see, some health risk behaviors up here, including things like smoking, and you're more likely to develop depression, liver disease, and some other things. So the mental, emotional, and physical impact of ACEs is directly related to the number of ACEs experienced. This means that a high ACE score, meaning a score of 4 or more, means that the body experiences a chronic state of stress. This toxic stress can lead to epigenetic changes in the body among the immune, endocrine, and neurological systems. The stress and trauma can also increase one's risk for developing autoimmune disorders in which the immune system mistakenly attacks the body. Examples of this include things like rheumatoid arthritis, celiac disease, psoriasis, and more. I think there's over 100 autoimmune diseases, so they can vary a lot in severity. So they found that people with a high number of ACEs engage in a different kind of coping style than those who haven't experienced it. So participants with a high number of ACEs tend to engage in less problem-focused coping and more avoidant emotion-focused coping. So problem-focused coping focuses on resolving the problem and building a sense of self-efficacy, whereas AEF coping is characterized by strategies that serve to diminish one's negative affective experience in response to the stressor, but do little to resolve the actual stressor. Considering that exposure to ACEs is linked to this AEF coping, there is reason to consider that when coupled with bereavement, ACEs can potentially increase the risk of developing PCBD. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that is in the next slide. If someone is experiencing distress and yearning that affects their overall daily functioning at least 12 months post-loss, they may be experiencing persistent complex bereavement disorder. So PCBD can increase high-risk health behaviors such as smoking and increase the likelihood of cardiac illness and cancer. And a major risk factor for developing PCBD is traumatic death, meaning experiencing the loss of a loved one due to suicide, homicide, or accident. The literature shows that both PCBD and ACEs can affect the way in which the body and mind function, so that they both highlight the mind-body connection. There's a gap in literature regarding how ACEs and PCBD may interact with each other. This means that there hasn't really been substantial research done on whether or not childhood trauma can affect the likelihood of developing PCBD. This project is intended to help fill the gap. So the two hypotheses that this study has, number one is ACE scores will have a significant positive correlation with PCBI scores among young adults aged 18 to 25. And the persistent complex bereavement inventory is just a survey that determines basically how much the grief is affecting your daily life. Our second hypothesis is ACE scores will have a significant positive correlation with the Texas Revised Inventory of Grief among young adults aged 18 to 25. And the trig present is basically just one section of the Texas Revised Inventory of Grief that only measures present grief. Some variables that might affect the relationship between ACEs and PCBD and the overall grief response are closeness to the deceased, presence or absence of supportive caregiver during childhood, and time since loss. There have been studies that the closer that you are to the person that passed away, generally the stronger the grief response and the more likelihood to develop PCBD. And it has been shown that the presence of a supportive caregiver during childhood helps mitigate the negative effects of ACEs. And of course, time since loss may affect the overall grief response. The study used non-probability convenient sampling, and recruitment was done via email to undergraduate students in the College of Health and Society at HPU, as well as through social media such as Facebook and Reddit. To measure the relationship between ACEs and PCBD and ACEs in present grief, two Pearson's correlation coefficients were calculated. The sample consisted of 12 young adults aged 18 to 25. They all experienced at least one loss through death, and they were all at least 1 year post-loss. So the results of our Pearson correlation coefficient showed that there was no significant relationship between ACE and PCBI scores or ACE and trig present scores. So we failed to reject both null hypotheses. One of the major limitations of this study was the small sample size. A small sample size of at least 30 would have been more ideal. And most losses did occur more than 4 years ago, which may have affected the results. And again, there is a lack of generalizability, like a lot of studies, considering that most participants were Caucasian and most participants were female. In terms of implications, the intersection of grief and childhood trauma is an issue that influences the work of social workers. Based on this particular study and its findings, childhood adversity and trauma may or may not play a role in how one grieves. One's grief over the loss of a loved one is highly individualized and influenced by a multitude of factors. Social workers should be aware that every loss is different in the same way that each client is different. It would be helpful for social workers who are treating grieved individuals to be aware of their ACE score in addition to other general intake information regarding one's family of origin. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.